elected to oversee this company conduct an emergency investigation of all of these practices before any further rate hikes.
All right. Well, obviously the commissioner is not here. He was invited, but Tony, can you answer that question?
Well, yeah. It's somewhat disappointing that there's a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding as to what the rules are and what the laws are. For example, Consumer Watchdog wrote some of those laws. We're following the laws that he wrote. So he may have an issue with that, but we're really following the formulas and the laws. It's very complex with regard to rates and premiums. Premiums are already increasing before any of these other new things come into play with regard to catastrophe models, reinsurance, and those sorts of things. And people were already having availability problems. We can't solve the affordability problem until we solve the availability problem. Once we solve the availability problem, you'll have more companies competing, because in order for insurance companies to use these new tools that the new regulations will allow, they have to commit to writing more policies in these distressed areas. So that's really the goal.
Okay, Harvey is shaking his head. You don't see that happening?
We looked very closely at those regulations that Mr. Signorelli is talking about, and the commissioner has gone around the state promising, if I'm going to deregulate the insurance companies, and in exchange they're going to sell more policies. But there's loopholes in those regulations that would allow an insurance company to sell no more policies.
Rex,
yeah.
I want you to answer a question, because you said something earlier about having 2 years to file or 2 years on your claim. You made a mention of 2 years. Can you explain?
Maybe Tony did.
Okay.
Yeah, the 2 years it applies to people that had a total loss of their home. They're allowed to get the next 2 renewals.
Okay.
So that just protects them from losing their policy.
All right.
I mean, I think the important thing to remember, well, first of all, to the previous comments, the new regulations that are coming online, they have nothing to do with the price increases that we've seen over the last several years. Those have been under the rules that Consumer Watchdog wrote. So I don't understand the point he's trying to make. But moving forward, it's important to remember the Department of Insurance, under the Consumer Watchdog bill that sets the law of today, it requires the state to play 2 roles. One is to make sure the state protects against excessive rates, and the other is to make sure that insurance companies have enough money to pay their claims and that their solvency is not jeopardized. So in the State Farm example that they were talking about, just look at what the judge said in recommending approval of the rate increase. It said their solvency was incredibly jeopardized, and that in the absence of a rate increase, are they going to be there? So we have 2 things to consider here, and if the answer is always going to be in a hotter, drier future, we're going to have, fewer claims? When you have homes built near burnable things, we're going to have fewer claims? No, we're going to have more claims in a hotter, drier future. That's going to mean more insurance losses, and that's going to mean you have to find a way to fund those.
Okay. Joy, before I let you speak, I do want to get in some phone calls. We did have a phone bank yesterday, and a number of viewers called in. And when I say a number, I want to say about 500, I believe, in just the first 3 hours. So I'm going to go with one of their questions, because we think it's important to get to that. And it's about the viewers and how we can help them. This was from Cynthia. She asked, can an insurance company drop you because you filed a claim? Who wants to go?
I can
Okay,
start.
Tony.
Well, first it's going to depend on your insurance company. For the most part, the fact that you filed a claim isn't enough reason to non-renew you, let's say, or cancel your policy. However, if you have more than one claim over a period of time, there are some companies that will non-renew you in those certain situations, depending on what kind of claim it is. If it's
and that's in the small print. That's for you to read when you file, when you get your insurance.
Yeah, it's when you get your insurance. Also, you may get a notice after you've had a claim as to how it may work if you have another claim and that sort of thing. But it is confusing to people. We admit that, and that's why if people feel that they're in a situation like that, they certainly should give us a call and let us walk them through it.
So, but does that happen? I mean, are people getting canceled? Well, just for one claim?
It depends on the size of the claim and the type of claim. For example, if it's a huge water claim where there's low maintenance on the water system and the pipes, then it may result in the insurance company saying that's not the kind of home we want to insure. But it's more of the exception than the rule, a single claim.
And well, I was going to say, would they talk about that when you go to get that insurance? Would they tell you that we're not, okay, Harvey's shaking his head, we're not going to pay for certain types of incidents, like a water claim?
Yeah.
No, I mean,
Should the consumer know that, though?
I mean, if you're a
Should be
lawyer
informed?
and you have a few dozen hours to read the policy, they can figure it out. But when you go in there, it's all about buy the policy. Some companies are reputable. A few companies will stand by the policy. But when it comes to, for example, what everybody's dealing with right now, which is smoke damage, which is required by law to be covered, many companies, including State Farm, are refusing or denying or delaying. And go ahead.
No, I don't want to cut you off, Harvey.
No, please.
I mean, I think what this is getting at is the basic problem that many companies are simply not fulfilling their contracts to their policyholders. And that's where we really need our regulators to step in. I mean, so imagine if this was like cars, okay? If you were just selling cars and you had a regulator that says, sure, I'm here to protect the profits of this company. And I'm not even going to look at whether they're delivering cars. That's not my concern here. What happens then, and even if I have hundreds of complaints that I understand this is the worst player in the industry, they're the worst at delivering cars, but I'm not going to concern about that. That green lights systemic abuse, and it sends a message to every policyholder.
We're going to talk more about that, but how do we answer Cynthia's question? They shouldn't be able to drop the claim.
Yeah, no, well, let me just clarify, Pat. They'll pay the claim. They're not going to deny the claim. It's just that if it results in an increased risk for the company and they have that in their underwriting guidelines filed with the Department of Insurance, then they would be permitted to non-renew that policyholder down the road.
Okay, but not denial.
There's a term for it. It's called use it and lose it.
Okay.
You pay for the premium all those years. The minute you file a claim, thanks for coming.
All right, we'll be right back. As you could tell, we have so much more to talk about, so much more to cover here on our town hall. We'll be back after a few words from